Well, salutations, fellow idiots. Welcome back to yet another episode of that full moon madness, baby. So since we have completed our trio of urban classics coverage this wave, I hope it was as good for you as it was for me, because I am satisfied. That shit aside, though, since that's done and over with, we can go back to some classic 90s era full moon shit. The stuff that we all think of when we think of full moon. And the movie that we're going to talk about today is, like, easily in my top 5 full moon movies of all time. It's pretty high up in my just general list of all-time favorite horror films. It's a movie that I tried a couple of times as a little kid. It was a little bit too much for a Wemo. But once I got into high school, I came around to it in a big way, because for a little bit there I was obsessed with Reanimator and From Beyond, in this movie, pretty much everything involving Stuart Gordon, Brian Usna, Barbara Crampton, and Jeffrey Combs. I just loved it. So this is one of 3 movies, along with Reanimator and From Beyond, that was probably on a constant loop in my house for a good year and a half. And that is Stuart Gordon's Castle Freak. Absolutely love this fucking movie. Of that trio that I mentioned, I think it's the most underrated one. It's easy to just heap all of the love onto Reanimator and From Beyond, because they're more fantastical movies. But this shows that Stuart Gordon could do sort of vintage, classic, almost gothic style horror, but put his fucked up twist on it and just make it a modern classic. Essentially what you got on your hands with Castle Freak is just a, really dysfunctional monster in a big dark house movie. I think it fucking rules. I think if you've not seen it, you've done yourself a huge disservice. So let's jump in there and find out why. Because trust me, it'll be obvious. Some of this shit right now you will never be able to unsee. Just giving you a fair warning. Castle Freak was directed by Stuart Gordon and produced by Maurizio Maggi. It had a screenplay by Dennis Powley and Stuart Gordon himself. It stars Jeffrey Combs, Barbara Crampton, Jessica Dollarhide, and Jonathan Fuller. It's got music by Richard Band, cinematography by Mario Volpiani. It was edited by Burt Gladstein. It was distributed by Full Moon Entertainment. It was released in November of 1995. Unfortunately, this movie was produced right towards the end of, their Paramount distribution days, when they were starting to have financial issues, which led into the late 90s era of Full Moon, which eventually led into the modern era, which is dark times on a lot of fronts. But thankfully, Stuart Gordon was able to shoot it in the same castle he used to shoot The Pit and the Pendulum for Full Moon previously, so that adds a lot to the production value and the overall vibe of the film. So basic gist of Castle Freak is, John and Susan Riley, played by Jeffrey Combs and Barbara Crampton respectively, are moving into this awesome castle in Italy that Jeffrey Combs' character has inherited on account of his distant relation to the Duchess d'Orsino, who was some crazy royal bitch who died up in the castle after being like a recluse for decades. And she had no direct living relatives to inherit the castle and its estate, so it went to the next of kin, and that happens to be Jeffrey Combs' character. Him and his wife are on rocky ground because they're dealing with the death of their son, who died in a car accident that also happened to involve Jeffrey Combs' character being drunk behind the wheel. It was caused because he dropped his Sega Game Gear on the ground and tried to get out of his car seat to retrieve said Game Gear. For some reason, I find that fucking hilarious. In any case, they're dealing with this. They're kind of, not sleeping in the same rooms and whatnot. They've got their daughter, named Rebecca, along with them, played amazingly by Jessica Dollarhide. Really a shame she didn't do more movies. And she's blind on account of this same accident. So not only is he dealing with getting over his drinking problem and the death of his son, which he feels like it's his fault, and his wife definitely fucking agrees, but he's also dealing with the guilt of having blinded his daughter. So not necessarily a happy family moving into this castle. Pretty quickly, it's evident that there's some type of disfigured freak living in the basement of this castle, or confined in the basement rather. He eventually escapes and starts fucking murdering. Just eating cats, biting off titties, the whole 9 yards. He is not a happy freak, and it's perfectly understandable considering from the opening scenes of the film we know that this crazy Duchess bitch was abusing the shit out of him. She had him locked in this crazy dungeon. She was whipping him with this vicious cat of nine tails and barely feeding him. And when she died alone in this house on account of being a recluse, he was basically starved in there and probably driven even more mad than he already was by years of torture. She'd castrated him and cut out his tongue, clearly disfigured his face, and he was just sort of damaged and kind of crippled from years of just vicious beatings and being isolated in a fucking dungeon. They don't quite realize that there's somebody else loose in this castle. It's a massive fucking castle, which it turns out Charles Band actually owned. That's how you know how insanely well Full Moon was doing for a while there, when Charles Band owns a castle in Italy. Anyway, they don't realize there's someone else in the house, and it's huge, so it's perfectly understandable that they don't realize this. Their newly blinded daughter is obviously getting in touch with her other senses, and she keeps trying to tell them that she's like heard something else in the house, you know. And when the freak sneaks in her room to steal some bed sheets and maybe get a squeeze on those boobies, she knows for sure that somebody else is in the house. On the side of this, you know, one of these people that's been murdered by the freak has been reported missing. It's a girl that had came back to the house with, you know, Jeffrey Combs' character because he was a bit sauced up after finally relapsing on account of, you know, all the stress and regret and everything. And he got a little action with her. The freak wanted to replicate said action, and, you know, one thing led to another. She ended up dead. And they kind of suspect Jeffrey Combs of these murders because word's gotten out that, you know, he's on the outs with his wife. News travels fast in this Italian village. Eventually, after they discover their fucking mutilated bodies, he's picked up as a suspect in these crimes. And he's got to fight to prove his innocence while at the same time try to get back to the castle to protect his family, who are now left in there alone with this monstrous freak. So as you would expect, it ends up with them versus the monster in a final battle to the death. I don't want to ruin any of the twists to the movie. There is a lot more to the plot than what I've laid out for you guys. I want to leave that there for you to unpack yourselves. But just everything about this movie is pretty much fucking fantastic, from the settings to the general premise to everybody's performances. Honestly, I think this is one of the better Jeffrey Combs performances I've ever seen, and Barbara Crampton isn't far behind him. I mean, the sort of tension in a damaged marriage is very, you know, prevalent through every single scene that they play together. I imagine they were laughing and yucking it up in between takes because they have a good relationship, I would imagine. But man, did they sell a convincing couple that just like can't get over this event and kind of need this insane tragic situation for them to mutually come together on to help them move forward through it. Jonathan Fuller, who plays Giorgio the Freak, can't go unmentioned either. His performance is fucking flawless. The entire principal cast just slays. Even the lady that plays their like housekeeper and the detective dude that's investigating the shit absolutely kill it as well. There's not a weak link in the entire cast. What else? I mean, you know, the soundtrack kicks ass. Richard Band definitely knows his way around a score. All the effects are pretty fucking awesome. It's just peak Full Moon and peak Stuart Gordon simultaneously, and one that should not be missed if you're a fan of either. Outside of that, honestly, I would go as far as to say that this is probably my favorite portrayal of a sympathetic monster outside of the original Frankenstein. I mean, there's a couple of moments in this movie where I legitimately choke up a little bit every time that I watch it. That Jonathan Fuller was not fucking around with his performance. Just, my god. Fucking flawless. Now, in terms of this digitally remastered edition, it's pretty fucking tasty as well. Movie looks beautiful, sounds beautiful, and has a decent amount of special features. Those include Castle Speak with Stuart Gordon, the original Castle Freak Video Zone, William Shatner interviews with Stuart Gordon, Jeffrey Combs, and Barbara Crampton, and some Full Moon trailers. Yeah, they could have thrown a commentary or two on there, but at $9.95 for this beautiful digitally remastered DVD edition of the movie, I can't complain. It's exactly the upgrade that I needed. Actually only had this on VHS prior, so, you know, definitely stoked on the purchase. I hear tell they've got a very nice Blu-ray out for it as well. Also reasonably priced, I think $14.95. Full Moon, for what they put into these restorations on their old classics, deserve every penny of that fucking money. But you can get them even cheaper if you do it during a sale, so definitely don't sleep on this shit. Get out there and check out Castle Freak as soon as possible. It is available on Tubi, as well as Full Moon Streaming and Amazon Prime. At least I'm pretty sure. You know what? Get out there and get yourself a copy of it. I don't care if you get it on VHS, DVD, Blu-ray, Laserdisc, I don't know. Any fucking format that you get Castle Freak on, you will not regret it. That's all we got on this, guys. As always, I have been Mosley. You have been a bunch of sexy beasts, and this has been yet another another episode of that full moon madness, baby. Cheers. Thanks for watching.
The world of Full Moon lives online at fullmoondirect.com. Classics like Puppet Master, Demonic Toys, Subspecies, and more recent favorites Ginger Dead Man, Evil Bong, Killjoy, and more can be found at fullmoondirect.com on DVD, Blu-ray, limited edition box sets, replicas, toys, shirts, and more. Only available at fullmoondirect.com.